7. Okay, so my introduction. This presentation is to teach how to have better conversations, how to learn how to bridge and gap between talking and listening, and the meaning behind it. Another topic this presentation will cover is communication and what to avoid to say and how to adapt your language to different contexts. Okay, so why are conversations so important? Conversations are important because they help people use language and nonverbal signals and words to communicate and interact. Moreover, it involves the exchange of facts, ideas, thoughts, and feelings. This occurs on real time, is an art, and involves reciprocal and rhythmic verbal interactions. And so this is a video that will explain the different types of listening and why it's so important.
It's easy to tell when someone's not paying attention, but it can be surprisingly tricky to know what truly excellent listening looks like. Behavioral scientists have found that good listening is one of the most important things we can do to improve our relationships, develop our worldview, and potentially even change people's minds. So what can we do to become better listeners? At its core, listening in a one-on-one conversation is about taking an interest in another person and making them feel understood. There's no universally agreed upon definition of high-quality listening, but some recurring features include attentiveness, conveying understanding, and showing a positive intention towards the speaker. This doesn't mean you can simply go through the motions. Researchers have found that merely smiling and nodding at set intervals doesn't quite work. However, there is something slightly performative about listening, in that it's important to show you're doing it. So in addition to actively attending to a speaker's words, good listeners also use questions and body language that indicate their understanding and their desire to understand. This might feel awkward at first, and what's most effective might depend on your relationship with the speaker. But with time and practice, you can internalize these basic behaviors. So let's say a good friend wants to tell you about an issue they're having with their partner. Before even starting your conversation, remove any distractions in the environment. Turn off the TV, take off your headphones, and put your phone away. Farrah. One study showed that even the visible presence of a phone made conversations feel less intimate and fulfilling to those involved. Once the conversation begins, one of the most important things you can do is also the most obvious. Try not to interrupt. This doesn't mean you need to stay completely silent, but if you do interject, look for natural pauses to ask open-ended questions that benefit the speaker, not just your curiosity. Questions like, what happened next? Or, how did that make you feel? Confirm that you're following the story while also helping the speaker dive deeper into their own thoughts. Another great way to show your understanding is by summarizing what you just heard and asking if you missed anything. Summaries like these show the speaker that you're truly trying to understand them, rather than just waiting for your turn to talk. Speaking of which, while a good conversation requires back and forth, planning out your response while a speaker is talking is a common way to miss what's being said. So try to stay present, and if you lose focus, don't be shy about asking the speaker to repeat what you missed. This might feel embarrassing, but asking for clarification actually shows that you're committed to understanding. Finally, don't be afraid of silence. It's okay to ask for a moment to formulate your response, and taking a beat to think can help speakers reflect on their speech as well. These might seem like small changes, but together they make a big difference. And when people feel heard, they report more satisfaction, trust, and connection in their relationships. In the workplace, employees who feel heard generally experience less burnout and perceive the managers who listen to them more favorably. Unfortunately, while it might be easy to listen to some people, it can be hard to muster all this focus of attention if you disagree with or dislike the speaker. But these situations might actually benefit most from your efforts to listen openly. The theory of psychological reactance suggests that trying to force someone to change their mind makes them more likely to defend their point of view. However, recent studies suggest that high-quality listening fosters open-mindedness by creating a non-judgmental and psychologically safe environment. Of course, truly open-minded listening isn't about changing people's minds. Good listening is not the same as agreeing, and conversations don't have to end with a happy resolution. But even during a disagreement, sometimes being heard is enough to start a deeper conversation. So what happens if you can't connect to someone? Or worse, what happens if they reject you? Learn what makes rejection such a uniquely painful experience and how to work through it with this video. Or get more actionable science-based advice on how to build character at ed.ted.com/build character.
Okay, so listening for me is like so important because I hate when people don't listen to me, and I really like how this video goes into detail about that. What does it mean to listen? So taking like interest into somebody else's life and like not just your own, like not being selfish about it, and then kind of just like going deeper to find out more about them and like what they have to say. And some communication motives to manage, to stay calm, excuse from, involvement, fondness, and the like. There's definitely more, but that's like the most important I felt like. And then this is a video about what is social penetration theory, and she'll go deeper with it. Okay, never mind. Okay, so what motivates self-disclosure? So self-disclosure is when two or more people are having just a normal day-to-day conversation. And what motivates it? So motivations of self-disclosure come from when you're listening to the other person as they talk, you find out things about them. As you listen, you get information. And it's really just like having conversation and like telling things about yourself that they wouldn't know just by looking at you. So this video explains what that is in better detail.
If we think about self-disclosure, this is probably what most of us think about. You know, we're sitting in an office, pouring our hearts out to some psychologist, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that if that's what you need to do. But that isn't really what self-disclosure is all about. So let's figure out what it is and how we can use it to make our relationships better.
Tell me about your mother.
Maybe next time. Social penetration theory tells us that as relationships develop, our communications change from relatively shallow, unimportant communications like, hey, nice weather we're having, isn't it? To intimate and far deeper communications that actually mean something to us on a personal level. This is what leads us to self-disclosure.
Tell me again why I'm carrying a sword and a shield.
It's to remind you that self-disclosure isn't all sunshine and puppy dogs. You need to be careful when you disclose things about yourself. Self-disclosure is a way that we can start to build trust in our relationships. We tell people a little bit about ourselves and they tell us a little bit about themselves, and suddenly we realize that we can trust each other with that little bit of information, and then maybe we decide to give them a little more information. That's how relationships grow, right? So self-disclosure, it can be cathartic. It can also help us understand ourselves and the people that we have relationships with a little better. It can also help us to increase the positive feelings that we have in our relationships.
Why am I dressed up like some medieval king with a crown and robes?
That's a great question. I'm just waiting until you're comfortable enough with me to tell me about it. As I mentioned before, self-disclosure isn't always all sunshine and puppy dogs. It's important to know when you should self-disclose important information about yourself, and you should also realize that some people may never be ready to know some information about you. You need to make a decision about how important it is to you to tell that person this information. Now, each situation is different, and this video isn't about how to make that decision, but I will say that before saying something that could end a relationship or hurt someone's feelings, I think it makes sense to consider your options, because you can't unsay something once it's been said.
I cannot believe that you would say something like that to me.
Okay, everybody, that's everything I wanted to talk about today, at least for self-disclosure. Don't forget, self-disclosure is a very important part of developing intimacy and trust in a relationship. Just make sure that it's reciprocal and appropriate. So that means that both people in the relationship are sharing similar types of information, and neither one of them is sharing too much too soon, because that can be super uncomfortable. But that's a different discussion altogether. Have a great day.
Okay, so how does self-disclosure influence what people think about us? Okay, so controlling one's image is self-presentation, like how people look at you differently by the things you say. The intentional and unintentional process by which we control how others view us. A persona is the outward appearance one shows in social settings, and then a facade is a false front that conceals a person's true nature. Okay, so this video talks about what social penetration theory is.
Most of us have likely experienced the nerves that come with getting to know someone. Our hypothetical friend Reggie is definitely feeling nervous while he's waiting at a restaurant for his new acquaintance, Emma. He decided to wear a shirt from his favorite local band, the Screaming Sun Devils, as a conversation starter. After all, he's a huge fan. And when Emma arrives, it turns out that she's wearing a Screaming Sun Devils shirt too. And connecting right away over their same favorite band leads to a deeper conversation about their passion for experimental jazz metal, which helps Reggie and Emma build a rapport. Reggie and Emma are following what communication experts have found is a pretty standard formula. As we move down the path towards emotional intimacy with other people, we divulge more and more personal information with one another. And when people get to know the real us, it can bring us closer together. But it's totally valid if sharing deeply personal information makes us feel vulnerable. So by understanding certain patterns and choosing how much to share at different stages in a relationship, we can build relationships while still protecting our privacy. And in the process, we can learn how to peel back the layers of who we are to create meaningful connections with other people. I'm Cassandra Ryder, and this is Study Hall Intro to Human Communication. As relationships develop, we progress from sharing superficial things about ourselves, like our favorite ice cream flavor or band, to sharing deeper things that we wouldn't put on a t-shirt, like our deepest fears. So as a relationship grows, we disclose more and more about ourselves. The process we go through to purposefully reveal information about ourselves to another person that they wouldn't have otherwise known is called self-disclosure. So when Reggie wore his Screaming Sun Devil shirt, he made a choice to share something about himself, namely that he has very interesting taste in music, just like Emma apparently. So even though we're sharing information someone else wouldn't have otherwise known about us, self-disclosure doesn't have to be super deep or private to be meaningful. But there are different ways to go about disclosing information to people. In fact, we use two different types of self-disclosure depending on the situation we're in and the potential risks of sharing information about ourselves. First, breadth is the number of topics a person feels comfortable discussing in a relationship. Like, early on in a relationship, we probably have more surface-level conversations about a lot of different topics. That's because covering a wide range of topics gives us a better chance of finding common ground when we're getting to know someone new. And since we don't know people that well when we first meet, sharing really personal information can feel a bit risky. So on their first date, Reggie and Emma will probably talk about a wide breadth of surface-level things, like where they're from, what they do for work, and their favorite movies in order to get to know each other. But as they get to know each other, they might narrow the breadth and focus on a few topics. Then there's the depth of self-disclosure, which refers to how personal or deep our communication with others is. So when it comes to depth, what we share can go from really impersonal stuff to really personal stuff. In fact, in new relationships, we start off with small talk, which is when we share superficial details about ourselves with another person. This allows us to start the process of relationship building so we can hopefully move on to more personal levels of self-disclosure as our connection grows. So while Reggie is comfortable sharing his love of music with Emma, it's probably not a good idea for him to talk about the ugly breakup he had with his ex-girlfriend on a first date. But if Emma and Reggie keep seeing each other, they'll probably self-disclose more personal information about themselves over time. That's because when we share more about ourselves with others and they share more with us, we grow closer. And when we get to know people better, our self-disclosure gradually gets deeper and includes sharing our observations, thoughts, feelings, and needs. So what we share with the breadth and depth of topics impacts our relationships. But an element of time is also influential. For instance, think about frequency, which refers to how often we talk to someone. Like, if you talk to your mom on the phone every day, the frequency of your communication paves the way for high levels of self-disclosure in your relationship with her. But we can also have a high level of self-disclosure in relationships where we talk less frequently, if we communicate for a longer duration. In general, as we get closer to someone, we tend to have longer conversations. And the longer we talk with someone, the more likely we are to get into the deep stuff. For instance, Reggie and Emma both have busy lives, so they can only go on dates on the weekend, but they usually spend the whole day together hanging out and talking nonstop. So even though the frequency of their self-disclosure is lower, the duration of their conversations makes up for that and keeps their relationship strong. But progressing from sharing surface-level anecdotes to our deepest thoughts, feelings, and needs takes time. It doesn't all happen at once. In fact, according to psychologists Erwin Altman and Dalmas Taylor, self-disclosure happens in consecutive stages that move from more shallow to much deeper over time. And
that is my presentation about self-disclosure. And this is an activity. Can I have a piece of paper? Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Okay, so for this activity, there's 3 steps to it, and all you need is a piece of paper. And so for communication, you need use your eyes and everything, and you need to make sure that your eyes are stay contact with them. For your ears, whenever I can't hear somebody, I'll put it like this, put my hand by my ear, and scientifically prove it, and it helps the noise stay on that person. And then direction isn't really talking or listening, but it's still important. And so just making sure that what you're doing is focused on that person, and if not, it's super rude. And that's my activity in my presentation. Thank you.